The air was filled with the clinking of cutlery and the low murmur of conversation as we gathered around the dinner table at Dr. Stevens's home. It had been a few months since we returned from the North Pole Research Station, and this was our first reunion. Despite the warmth of the evening and the comfort of familiar faces, an unspoken tension lingered between us. As the evening wore on, the conversation inevitably turned to our time in the Arctic, and the memories we had tried to bury began to surface. It all started innocently enough. We were a team of 6, tasked with studying the effects of climate change on the Arctic ecosystem. Our station was a small, isolated outpost, surrounded by miles of ice and snow. The sun hung perpetually low in the sky, casting an eerie golden glow over everything. At first, the novelty of constant daylight was intriguing, even exciting. But as the days turned into weeks, the excitement wore off, replaced by an ever-present sense of unease. The first signs of trouble appeared when our sleep patterns began to deteriorate. No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't adjust to the unending daylight. Some of us wore blackout masks, others tried heavy curtains, but nothing worked. We were always tired, always on edge. Our tempers grew short, and minor disagreements turned into full-blown arguments. One night, or what we called night, since it was still bright as day outside, I woke to the sound of whispering. At first I thought it was my imagination, but as I strained to listen, I could make out distinct voices. They were speaking in a language I didn't understand, their tone urgent and angry. I got up and followed the sound, which led me to the common room. There, I found Emily, James, and Dr. Tom Harris, another member of our team, standing in a circle, their eyes closed, swaying slightly as they whispered in unison. My heart pounded in my chest. I called out to them, but they didn't respond. I reached out and shook Emily by the shoulder, and she snapped out of it, her eyes wide with fear. "What were you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. Emily shook her head, clearly confused. "I don't know. I was dreaming, I think, but I was awake." James and Tom had similar reactions. None of them could explain what they had been doing or why. We tried to brush it off as a strange side effect of sleep deprivation, but deep down, we knew something was wrong. As the days wore on, the hallucinations became more frequent and more disturbing. We saw shadowy figures moving through the corridors, heard disembodied voices calling our names, and felt unseen hands touching our skin. One night, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, our medical officer, woke up screaming. She claimed she had seen a ghostly figure standing at the foot of her bed, watching her with hollow eyes. "It was real," she insisted, her voice shaking. "I know it was real." We tried to comfort her, but the fear in her eyes mirrored our own. We were all experiencing the same things, and no amount of rational explanation could dispel the terror that gripped us. The breaking point came when Dr. Mark Thompson, our team leader, disappeared. We searched the station from top to bottom, but there was no sign of him. His equipment and personal belongings were untouched, and there were no footprints leading away from the station. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Panic set in. We were stranded, hundreds of miles from the nearest outpost, with no way to call for help. The hallucinations grew more intense, and we began to doubt our own senses. Were we really seeing and hearing these things, or were our minds playing tricks on us? One evening, as we huddled together in the common room, trying to make sense of what was happening, Emily suggested that we leave. "We need to get out of here," she said. "Whatever is happening, it's not natural. We're not safe." But leaving was easier said than done. The Arctic was an unforgiving place, and without Mark to lead us, our chances of survival were slim. We decided to wait for the supply plane, which was due to arrive in a week. It was the longest week of our lives. On the day the plane was scheduled to arrive, we packed our bags and waited on the ice, our eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. As the hours passed, our hope began to fade. The plane was late, and the whispers had returned, louder and more insistent than ever. Just when we thought we couldn't take it anymore, the plane appeared, a tiny speck in the distance. We waved frantically, relief washing over us as it drew closer. The plane landed, and we scrambled aboard, desperate to leave the nightmare behind. On our way back, we had been silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to process what we had experienced. When we finally returned to civilization, we were debriefed by the Research Institute, but our stories were met with skepticism. They said it was the midnight sun, that we were just hallucinating because of the lack of sleep. But we knew the truth. What we experienced was real, and the Arctic had claimed something from each of us. The midnight sun had shown us the darkest parts of our own minds, and no amount of time or distance could erase the horrors we had seen.